Marcus Chin stood in the briefing room, staring at the holographic display that showed certain death. The Nexus Fortress hung in space like a metal spider, its 8 arms reaching out from a central hub. Around it, thousands of mines drifted in careful patterns, each one designed to destroy anything that came too close. "The mission is impossible," Admiral Torres said, her voice heavy with frustration. "We've lost 12 scout ships just trying to map the minefield. The hegemony has Princess Lyralii locked inside that fortress, and there's no way to reach her." Marcus studied the rotating image. The fortress orbited Kronos 7, a gas giant that swirled with orange and red storms. The planet's gravity well made approach even more dangerous. Ships had to come in at exactly the right angle, or they would be pulled into the crushing atmosphere. "Sir, what about a small infiltration pod?" Marcus asked. The other officers turned to look at him. Commander Sarah Knox shook her head. "We tried that. The mines detect any metal larger than a dinner plate. The Vextai who built this thing knew what they were doing." Marcus had served with Knox during the siege of Arcturus Station. She was a good soldier, but she thought like most people, in straight lines. The hegemony expected straight-line thinking. "What if we don't go through the minefield?" Marcus said. "What if we go around it?" Admiral Torres frowned. "Around it?" "Marcus, the minefield extends for 3,000 kilometers in every direction." "Yes, sir, but it's designed to stop ships coming from normal space. What if we approach from the planet's shadow?" The room fell silent. Marcus walked to the display controls and zoomed in on Kronos 7. The gas giant's magnetic field created strange effects that scrambled most sensors. Ships avoided that area because navigation was nearly impossible. The magnetic interference would hide a small craft, Marcus continued. But it would also make it impossible to navigate properly. One wrong move, and you're pulled into the planet. "Exactly why no one tries it," Knox said. Marcus smiled. "No one alien tries it. Humans are different. We're good at flying by feel when our instruments fail." Admiral Torres studied the display. "Even if you somehow reached the fortress, how would you get inside? The Vextai built it like a hive. The passages are barely wide enough for humans. The guards are all larger species. That's our advantage," Marcus said. "I can move through spaces they can't. They'll never expect an attack from their own ventilation system." The Admiral looked at the other officers. Their faces showed doubt. The mission had already been classified as impossible by 3 different tactical committees. No one wanted to send a soldier to certain death. Marcus had volunteered for impossible missions before. During the war with the Crystal Syndicate, he had infiltrated a command ship by hiding inside a cargo container for 6 hours. When the hegemony attacked the colony on New Damascus, he had held off their advance single-handedly until reinforcements arrived. Other soldiers called him crazy. Marcus preferred to think of himself as stubborn. "Sir, Princess Lyralii has information about hegemony fleet movements," Marcus said. "If we don't get her out, millions of colonists will die when their next attack comes." Admiral Torres was quiet for a long moment. She had made difficult decisions before, but sending a soldier on a suicide mission was never easy. "The infiltration pod would have to be modified," she said finally. "Standard propulsion would be detected by the mines." "I've been working on that," Marcus said. He activated his personal data pad and projected new schematics. "Microthrusters only. No main engine signature. I calculate travel time at 43 hours to reach the fortress." Knox leaned forward to study the design. 43 hours in a pod that size. You'll barely have enough air. I'll make it work." "What about food? Water? Waste disposal?" Marcus had already thought about these problems. "Minimal rations. Recycled water system. Combat stims to stay alert. It won't be comfortable, but it's possible." The Admiral studied Marcus's face. She had known him for 7 years, since he was a young sergeant with more courage than sense. He had never failed a mission, but he had never attempted anything this dangerous. "The pod modifications will take 3 days," she said. "Use that time to study everything we know about Vextai hive construction. Learn their patterns. Understand how they think." Marcus straightened. "Yes, sir. Permission to begin preparations immediately." "Granted." "And Marcus?" The Admiral's voice softened slightly. "This mission is not an order. It's a request. No one would blame you for refusing." Marcus thought about the colonies on the Outer Rim. Families who had left Earth to build new lives among the stars. Children who played in alien sunlight, never knowing that enemy fleets were moving through the darkness toward them. I understand, sir. I volunteer. The next 3 days passed in a blur of preparation. Marcus studied Vextai architecture until he could navigate their tunnels in his sleep. He memorized fortress layouts and guard patrol schedules. He practiced moving through spaces barely wider than his shoulders. The engineers worked around the clock to modify his infiltration pod. They removed everything except the most basic life support systems. Every extra kilogram meant less fuel for the microthrusters. On the final night, Marcus sat in the observation deck, looking out at the stars. Commander Knox found him there. "Second thoughts?" she asked. "Always," Marcus said. "But not about the mission." Knox sat beside him. "What then?" "I think about whether we're doing enough. Whether humanity is pulling its weight in this war. You've done more than most entire battalions." Marcus shook his head. "Individual actions aren't enough. We need to prove that humans belong out here. That we're not just lucky to have survived this long." Knox was quiet for a moment. "You think one mission will prove that? I think every mission proves it a little bit. Every time we refuse to give up, every time we find a way when everyone says there isn't one." Marcus stood up. "The aliens think they understand us. They think we're just another species with better technology than we deserve. They don't understand that our real advantage isn't our ships or our weapons." "What is it then?" Marcus smiled. "We're too stubborn to know when we're supposed to die." The next morning, Marcus sealed himself into the tiny infiltration pod. The engineers had painted it matte black and covered it with sensor-dampening materials. It looked more like a coffin than a spacecraft. As the pod launched from the Defiance, Marcus felt the familiar calm that came before dangerous missions. Fear was useful. It kept soldiers alive. But when the mission began, fear had to be set aside. The pod drifted toward Kronos, 7, invisible against the background of stars. Marcus had 43 hours to reach the fortress. 43 hours to prove that impossible was just another word for something no one had been brave enough to try yet. The magnetic storms around Kronos, 7 hammered Marcus's pod like invisible fists. His instruments flickered and died one by one as the gas giant's field scrambled every electronic system. Most pilots would have panicked when their navigation computers failed. Marcus simply switched to manual control and flew by instinct. The pod tumbled through space, looking like just another piece of debris. Marcus had cut power to everything except life support. He drifted with the solar wind, making tiny corrections with bursts from his microthrusters. The mines around Nexus Fortress were programmed to ignore objects moving this slowly. Through the small viewport, Marcus watched the fortress grow larger. The Vextai had built it to intimidate enemies. 8 massive arms extended from a central hub, each one bristling with weapons and sensor arrays. The structure rotated slowly, its weapons always tracking potential threats. But the Vextai had made one mistake. They built for their own species, tall, thin insectoids who moved in predictable patterns. They never imagined that someone might attack through the spaces they considered too small to matter. Marcus studied the fortress through his scope. Maintenance shafts ran along the outside of each arm, barely wide enough for human shoulders. Air recycling vents were even smaller. The Vextai used automated systems to service these areas because their bodies couldn't fit. Perfect. The pod drifted closer to the fortress's shadow. Marcus waited until he was directly underneath the central hub before firing his thrusters. The burst of acceleration was brief, but precise. The pod shot toward a maintenance shaft opening like an arrow. Marcus held his breath as the pod slid into the shaft. Metal scraped against metal, but the opening was just wide enough. The pod came to rest inside the fortress's outer hull, invisible to external sensors. Marcus waited in the darkness, listening. The fortress hummed with activity. Ventilation systems cycled air through the corridors. Power conduits carried electricity to weapons and shields. Guard patrols moved through the main passages on their regular routes. After 10 minutes, Marcus was satisfied that his entry had gone undetected. He put on his infiltration suit and checked his weapons. A plasma pistol, 3 grenades, and a vibroknife. Not much against an entire fortress, but enough if he was smart about using them. The maintenance shaft was a tight fit, but Marcus had trained for this. He moved forward centimeter by centimeter, following the blueprints he had memorized. The shaft connected to the fortress's ventilation system, which would take him to the detention level. As he crawled through the metal tunnels, Marcus thought about the princess. Intelligence reports said she was young, probably in her early 20s. She had been captured during a diplomatic mission that went wrong. The hegemony had demanded ransom, but the alliance couldn't pay without revealing military secrets. Marcus reached a junction where the maintenance shaft connected to a larger air duct. He could hear voices below, hegemony guards speaking in their harsh, clicking language. 2 of them, maybe 3. Big enough to rip him apart if they caught him, but too large to follow him through the ventilation system. He moved past them silently and continued toward the detention level. The fortress was built like a maze, with passages that doubled back on themselves and dead ends that led nowhere. The Vextai loved complexity for its own sake. It made them feel superior to species that preferred simple, direct approaches. It also made them predictable. Marcus reached the detention level and found an access panel. He had studied the fortress's computer systems during his preparation. Vextai security was strong against direct attacks, but they never considered someone accessing their systems from inside the walls. The access panel required a genetic scan. Marcus had prepared for this too. He pulled out a small device that mimicked Vextai biosignatures. The panel beeped softly and opened. Information flowed across the small screen. Prisoner locations, guard schedules, security protocols. Marcus scrolled through the data quickly, looking for Princess Lyralii. He found her listed in cell block 7, maximum security. But something was wrong. The prisoner's full designation read, Prisoner 7749, X, Queen Zarathi of the Zephyrian Empire, captured during unauthorized diplomatic contact with hegemony forces. Marcus stared at the screen. Queen Zarathi, not Princess Lyralii at all. The Zephyrians were humanity's oldest allies. Their queen was ancient, powerful, and supposedly safe on the Zephyrian homeworld. What was she doing in hegemony space? Marcus thought quickly. The intelligence reports had been wrong, but the mission remained the same. A valuable ally was imprisoned and needed rescue. Whether she was a princess or a queen didn't change his duty. He memorized the path to cell block 7 and closed the access panel. The route would take him through 3 different ventilation systems and past at least 2 guard stations. Difficult, but not impossible. Marcus had been moving for 20 minutes when he heard the alarms. Red lights flashed through the air vents. Emergency speakers crackled with hegemony announcements. Marcus couldn't understand the language, but the tone was clear. Something was wrong. Had they detected his pod? Discovered his entry point? Marcus increased his speed, racing through the metal tunnels as quietly as possible. If the guards found him now, the mission would fail. He reached the final ventilation grate above cell block 7. Through the metal slats, he could see a corridor lined with prison cells. 2 hegemony guards stood at the far end, their attention focused on wall-mounted displays showing the fortress exterior. Marcus listened to their conversation. His translation implant picked up fragments. Sensor ghost near Section 4. Probably space debris. Maintain alert status. They were looking for his infiltration pod, but they hadn't found it yet. Marcus had maybe 10 minutes before they expanded their search. He removed the ventilation grate carefully and dropped into the corridor. The cells were made of transparent aluminum, allowing guards to observe prisoners at all times. Most of the cells were empty, but one held a figure that made Marcus's breath catch. Queen Zarathi was nothing like he had expected. Intelligence reports described Zephyrians as tall and elegant, but they hadn't mentioned the subtle glow that seemed to emanate from her skin. She was beautiful in an otherworldly way, with silver hair that moved like liquid and eyes that held depths Marcus couldn't understand. She looked up as Marcus approached her cell. Instead of surprise, her expression showed something that might have been relief. "You are human," she said in perfect English. Her voice was musical, like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "Yes, Your Majesty. I'm Commander Marcus Chun, Alliance Special Forces. I'm here to get you out." Queen Zarathi stood gracefully. "You should not have come. This place is a trap." Marcus studied the cell's locking mechanism. It was Vextai technology, complex, but not impossible to overcome. "What kind of trap?" "Someone in your Alliance command betrayed my presence here. The hegemony knows exactly what information I carry. She moved closer to the transparent wall. They want the location of the ancient weapon caches. Technology that could end this war. Marcus's hands stilled on the lock mechanism. Ancient weapons. The kind of power that could shift the balance between species permanently. All the more reason to get you out, he said. The moment we try to escape, every guard in this fortress will hunt us. They have been waiting for a rescue attempt. Marcus smiled grimly. Then, we'll give them something they're not expecting. He pulled out his plasma pistol and fired at the corridor's main power conduit. Sparks flew as electricity arced across metal walls. The lights went out, plunging the cell block into darkness. Emergency lighting flickered on, casting everything in red shadows. Alarms wailed throughout the fortress. Marcus heard running footsteps as guards responded to the power failure. What did you do? Queen Zarathi asked. Marcus finished overriding her cell lock. The transparent door slid open with a soft hiss. I made them think their trap was working, he said. Now they'll focus all their attention on this location while we escape through the one route they'll never expect. Which is, Marcus pointed toward the ventilation grate he had removed. The same way I came in. They built this place for species their size. They never considered that an advantage for someone smaller. Queen Zarathi looked at the narrow opening. You expect me to crawl through those passages? Unless you'd prefer to fight several hundred armed guards in the corridors. She considered this for a moment, then nodded. Very well. But I should warn you, if we are captured, I will not allow the weapon cache locations to fall into hegemony hands. Understood. Stay close and move quietly. We have a long way to go. As they climbed into the ventilation system, Marcus heard the cell block door explode open. Hegemony soldiers poured into the corridor, their heavy weapons ready to destroy any rescue attempt. But Marcus and Queen Zarathi were already gone, moving through passages too small for their enemies to follow. The fortress had become a maze designed by its builders to keep intruders out. Now it would help them escape. The ventilation tunnels led deeper into the fortress than Marcus had expected. He and Queen Zarathi crawled through passages that grew narrower with each turn. Behind them, the sounds of searching guards grew fainter but never completely disappeared. Where are we going? Queen Zarathi whispered. Marcus consulted the mental map he had memorized. The reactor core. It's the fastest route to my extraction point, but also the most dangerous. Dangerous how? Radiation levels that would kill most species in minutes. The Vextai built it assuming only their automated systems would need access. Queen Zarathi was quiet for a moment. And humans can survive this radiation? For a short time. Our cells repair damage faster than most species. We can handle what would be lethal exposure for others. They reached another junction. Marcus could feel heat radiating through the metal walls around them. The fortress's power core was massive, designed to run weapon systems that could destroy entire fleets. The energy it contained could boil oceans or crack planets. Marcus removed another ventilation grate and looked down into the reactor chamber. The space was enormous, stretching hundreds of meters in every direction. At the center, a sphere of contained energy pulsed with blue-white light. The power was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. A narrow bridge stretched across the chamber, connecting their current position to the far side, where Marcus's infiltration pod waited. The bridge had no railings or safety barriers. It was designed for maintenance robots, not living beings. We have to cross that, Marcus said. Queen Zarathi looked down at the energy core far below. If we fall, we don't fall. Simple as that. Marcus dropped from the ventilation shaft onto the bridge. The metal was warm under his feet, heated by radiation from the core. His suit's sensors immediately began detecting dangerous energy levels. They had maybe 15 minutes before the exposure became lethal. Queen Zarathi landed beside him with surprising grace. Her species had evolved on a high-gravity world, giving them excellent balance. She moved across the narrow bridge like she was walking on solid ground. They were halfway across when the trap was sprung. War Commander Thexrock materialized from a hidden alcove at the bridge's far end. He was massive even by hegemony standards, with 4 arms and armor that made him look like a walking tank. His species, the Krulon, were known for their tactical intelligence and complete lack of mercy. Commander Chun, Thexrock said in accented English. You have exceeded our expectations. Marcus drew his plasma pistol, but he knew it was useless. Krillon armor could withstand direct hits from ship-mounted weapons. A hand weapon wouldn't even scratch it. The rescue was always intended to succeed. Thexrock continued. We needed Queen Zarathi to feel safe before we extracted the weapon cache locations from her mind. You betrayed your own fortress defenses? Marcus asked. A small price. Once we have the ancient weapons, no alliance will be able to stand against us. The war will end within months. More hegemony soldiers appeared from concealed positions around the reactor chamber. They had plasma rifles trained on the bridge, cutting off any retreat. Marcus and Queen Zarathi were trapped in the open, surrounded by enemies on all sides. Your Majesty, Thexrock called to Queen Zarathi. You will provide the weapon cache coordinates, or we will begin by removing the humans' limbs one at a time. Queen Zarathi straightened. I will not betray the alliance, regardless of your threats. We shall see. Pain has a way of changing perspectives. Thexrock activated a neural probe device. The technology could extract information directly from a victim's brain, but the process was agonizing and usually fatal. He began walking toward them across the bridge, his heavy footsteps making the metal structure vibrate. Marcus felt the bridge supports groan under the combined weight of two large beings. The Vextai had built it for maintenance robots weighing a few hundred pounds, not armored soldiers weighing tons. An idea formed in Marcus's mind. Dangerous, probably suicidal, but their only chance. Your Majesty, he said quietly, when I give the signal, run for the far end of the bridge. What are you planning? Something stupid. Thexrock was only a few meters away now. The neural probe device hummed with deadly energy. Surrender, human. Your defiance serves no purpose. Marcus smiled. You know what your problem is, Thexrock? You think like an alien. Explain. You assume I'm trying to win this fight. Marcus pulled out his last grenade. But sometimes the best victory is making sure your enemy doesn't win either. Thexrock's eyes widened as he realized Marcus's intention. You would not dare. The fall would kill you both. Maybe. But you'll definitely die, and that's enough. Marcus triggered the grenade and threw it at the bridge supports behind Thexrock. The explosion sent shockwaves through the metal structure. Warning alarms screamed as stress indicators showed critical failure. Run! Marcus shouted to Queen Zarathi. She sprinted toward the far end of the bridge as the metal began to buckle. Marcus grabbed Thexrock around the waist, using his smaller size to get inside the alien's guard. The war commander tried to shake him off, but Marcus held on with the desperate strength of someone who had nothing left to lose. The bridge supports snapped with sounds like thunder. The entire structure tilted downward, sliding toward the reactor core far below. Marcus and Thexrock tumbled into empty air, locked together in a deadly embrace. As they fell, Thexrock tried to use his superior strength to break free. But Marcus had positioned himself so that any movement by the alien would send them both spinning faster toward the energy core. You are insane. Thexrock shouted over the roar of superheated air. That's what makes us dangerous, Marcus replied. They plummeted toward the reactor's containment field. The energy core pulsed below them like a captive star, beautiful and deadly. Marcus felt his suit's radiation detectors overload and shut down. The exposure levels were beyond measurement. Marcus used his last moments of consciousness to activate his suit's emergency systems. The electromagnetic pulse generator built into his cybernetic implants would discharge when his life signs failed. The pulse wouldn't be strong enough to damage the reactor itself, but it would overload every electronic system in the chamber. Thexrock realized what Marcus was doing in the final seconds before impact. You cannot stop the hegemony. There are others who know of the weapon caches. Maybe, Marcus said, but you won't be leading them. They struck the reactor's containment field in a flash of blue-white energy. Thexrock's armor provided no protection against forces that contained the power of stars. He was vaporized instantly, his last expression one of rage and disbelief. Marcus felt the energy tear through his body like liquid fire. His enhanced physiology fought against destruction, cellular repair systems working frantically to maintain life functions. But the power was too great, the damage too severe. As consciousness faded, Marcus saw Queen Zarathi reach the far side of the bridge. She was safe. The weapon cache locations would remain secret. The mission was complete. His cybernetic implants discharged their electromagnetic pulse, sending waves of interference through the fortress's systems. Lights failed throughout the station. Artificial gravity fluctuated wildly. Communication arrays went silent. In the reactor chamber, Queen Zarathi watched Marcus disappear into the energy core. According to every scientific principle she knew, nothing organic could survive direct contact with such forces. The human had sacrificed himself to ensure her escape and protect information that could determine the war's outcome. She had witnessed many acts of courage during her long life. Zephyrian warriors had died heroically defending their homeworld. Alliance soldiers had held impossible positions against overwhelming odds. But she had never seen anything like what Marcus Chun had just done. He had chosen certain death not for glory or honor, but simply because it was the right thing to do. No calculations, no hesitation, no thought of personal survival. Just immediate action to protect others at the cost of everything. As she ran through the damaged corridors toward Marcus's infiltration pod, Queen Zarathi made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. The human who had saved her would not be allowed to die, not if she could prevent it. The Zephyrian Empire possessed technologies that the Alliance had never imagined. Healing sciences that could reverse death itself under the right conditions. She activated her personal emergency beacon, sending a signal that would summon forces more advanced than anything in human space. Behind her, the reactor core pulsed with unstable energy. Deep within its containment field, patterns of quantum entanglement flickered around a form that should have been destroyed, but somehow still held together. Marcus Chin's consciousness drifted in a space between life and death, sustained by willpower alone. The rescue was about to begin. Queen Zarathi's emergency signal traveled through quantum space faster than light itself. Within minutes, reality began to bend around the disabled Nexus Fortress as Zephyrian bioships materialized from dimensional folds that human science couldn't explain. The ships looked more grown than built, their hulls flowing like liquid metal. They phased through the fortress walls as if the metal didn't exist, guided by technology that treated physical barriers as mere suggestions. Inside the largest ship, High Counselor Varek studied the readings from the reactor chamber with growing alarm. Your Majesty, the human's biopattern shows complete cellular breakdown. What you're requesting is impossible. Queen Zarathi stood before the main display, her silver hair moving with agitation. Nothing is impossible, Counselor. Only difficult. The quantum healing chambers have never been used on an alien species. We don't understand human biology well enough to predict the results. Then, we learn quickly. Varek exchanged glances with the other Zephyrian nobles present. They had served Queen Zarathi for centuries and had never seen her show such concern for a non-Zephyrian life. Your Majesty, our healing technology is restricted to the royal bloodline. Using it on an outsider violates fundamental laws. Queen Zarathi turned to face them. Her eyes held depths that spoke of wisdom gathered over millennia. Laws can be changed. Traditions can be broken. This human saved my life and protected information crucial to the war effort. He will not be allowed to die while I have the power to prevent it. But why? Counselor Mira stepped forward. Humans are a young species. They have contributed to the war effort, yes, but they remain primitive in many ways. Their technology is centuries behind ours. Their lifespans are brief. What makes this one individual worthy of such extraordinary measures? Queen Zarathi was silent for a moment, remembering Marcus falling towards certain death while locked in combat with an enemy twice his size. You didn't see what I saw, Counselor. You didn't witness pure courage without calculation or hesitation. This human didn't sacrifice himself for glory or honor. He did it because protecting others was more important than his own survival. Many soldiers show courage, Your Majesty. Not like this. Queen Zarathi moved to the viewing portal, looking down at the crippled fortress. When faced with certain death, most beings seek escape or negotiate for better terms. This human chose a third option: ensure his enemy's defeat even at the cost of his own life. I have lived for over 3,000 years and have never encountered such absolute dedication to duty. High Counselor Varek studied the bio readings again. Your Majesty, even if we attempt the healing, The energy exposure was beyond anything in our medical databases. The human's neural patterns are unusual. Unusual how? His brain shows quantum entanglement signatures similar to our own species. But that's impossible. Humans haven't evolved quantum consciousness. They shouldn't be capable of such neural complexity. Queen Zarathi felt a chill of recognition. Show me the detailed scans. The display filled with swirling patterns of energy that looked almost like mathematical equations written in light. Marcus's neural activity showed structures that matched Zephyrian brain patterns, but with unique variations that suggested untapped potential. Counselor Mira, access the ancient archives. Search for references to species showing similar quantum consciousness markers during evolutionary transitions. Myra's fingers moved across control surfaces that responded to thought as much as touch. Information flowed across the display in scripts so old that few Zephyrians could still read them. Your Majesty, there are records from the previous galactic civilization. References to bridge species that could link different evolutionary paths. The texts mention beings capable of quantum consciousness development during times of crisis. What happened to these bridge species? They vanished when the Devourers came. But the records suggest they were crucial to activating the ancient weapon systems left by the Forerunners. Queen Zarathi felt pieces of a vast puzzle clicking into place. The weapon caches I was protecting. They require quantum-linked consciousness to activate. According to these records, yes, no single species could operate them alone. They required mental cooperation between different evolutionary paths. And you believe this human shows signs of quantum consciousness development? Varric nodded slowly. The energy exposure from the reactor core seems to have accelerated some kind of neural evolution. If we can stabilize the process, do it. Your Majesty, if the other royal houses learn we used quantum healing technology on an alien, the political consequences will be my responsibility to handle. Queen Zarathi's voice carried the authority of absolute rule. Begin the healing process immediately. The bio-ship extended tendrils of living metal down into the reactor chamber. They found Marcus's body floating in a sphere of contained energy, somehow still intact despite exposure that should have reduced him to component atoms. The tendrils wrapped around him gently, creating a protective field as they drew him up into the ship's medical bay. The quantum healing chamber was a work of art as much as science. Crystalline walls channeled energy patterns that could repair damage at the cellular level. Only members of the royal family had ever been treated here, and the chamber had to be reconfigured for human physiology. Marcus looked dead. His skin was pale, his breathing barely detectable. But the medical sensors showed neural activity unlike anything in Zephyrian databases. His brain was rebuilding itself, creating new pathways that bridged different types of consciousness. Initiate healing sequence, Queen Zarathi commanded. Energy flowed through the chamber like liquid light. It surrounded Marcus's body, penetrating every cell and beginning repairs that seemed impossible. Burned tissue regenerated. Damaged organs rebuilt themselves. But the most dramatic changes were happening in his brain. Your Majesty, Varric reported, the human's neural development is accelerating beyond our models. He's not just healing. He's evolving. Into what? Something between human and Zephyrian consciousness. He's retaining his essential humanity while gaining quantum awareness capabilities. If this process completes successfully, he may become the first being capable of bridging our species' mental architectures. Queen Zarathi watched the healing process with growing amazement. Marcus's body was becoming something more than human while remaining fundamentally human. His enhanced physiology was adapting to quantum energies that would have destroyed most beings. How long for the process to complete? Several days, assuming no complications. But, Your Majesty, what will you tell the Alliance when they discover we have their soldier? Queen Zarathi had been considering this problem. Admiral Torres and the human fleet would assume Marcus had died in the reactor chamber. His sacrifice would become legendary among human forces, inspiring others to similar acts of courage. We tell them the truth. Eventually. But first, we must understand what he's becoming and what it means for both our species. And if the healing fails, then we will have honored a debt to a being who gave his life for others. But I don't believe it will fail. Humans have surprised everyone with their adaptability. This one has already survived exposure that should have been instantly fatal. The healing chamber pulsed with increasing intensity. Marcus's vital signs strengthened with each cycle. The quantum patterns in his brain grew more complex, developing structures that matched Zephyrian templates while maintaining human creativity and intuition. Your Majesty, Mira reported, long-range sensors are detecting movement in the outer galaxy. Ancient signature patterns consistent with the Devourer ships mentioned in the archives. Queen Zarathi felt ice in her veins. How long until they reach inhabited space? Based on their current trajectory and speed, perhaps 2 years, maybe less. Then, we have very little time to prepare. If the ancient weapons are our only defense, we'll need someone who can operate them. She looked at Marcus's healing form. Someone who can bridge the gap between species and unite our consciousness capabilities. You believe this human is that important? I believe he may be the key to survival for every species in this galaxy. The Devourers destroyed the previous civilization because no one could properly use the foreigner weapons. We won't make the same mistake. As if responding to her words, Marcus's eyes opened for the first time since his fall. They glowed with a faint light that seemed to come from within, a sign of quantum consciousness awakening. He looked directly at Queen Zarathi and spoke in a voice that carried harmonics impossible for normal human vocal cords. Where am I? Queen Zarathi smiled. You're safe. You're alive. And you're about to become something wonderful. Marcus tried to sit up, then stopped as he felt the changes in his body. Strength flowed through muscles that felt both familiar and strange. His enhanced senses picked up energy patterns he had never noticed before. Most remarkably, he could sense Queen Zarathi's thoughts as if they were whispered words. What did you do to me? We saved you. And, in doing so, we may have saved everyone. Marcus stood on the observation deck of the Zephyrian royal ship, watching stars that looked different through his enhanced vision. 3 weeks had passed since his rescue from the reactor chamber, and his body was still adapting to changes he barely understood. The quantum integration process is nearly complete, Queen Zarathi said as she joined him. How do you feel? Marcus flexed his hands, watching energy patterns flow beneath his skin like living light. Stronger, but also strange. Sometimes I can sense thoughts that aren't my own. Yours mostly. That's normal. Zephyrian consciousness operates on quantum frequencies that allow limited telepathic contact. You're developing similar capabilities while retaining your human individuality. Why did you save me? Your advisors made it clear they disapproved. Queen Zarathi was quiet for a moment. Because you showed me something I had forgotten after 3,000 years of life. Pure courage without calculation. Most beings, when facing death, seek ways to survive. You sought ways to ensure your enemy couldn't harm others, even knowing it would cost you everything. Marcus studied her reflection in the transparent metal viewport. That's just what humans do. We protect those who can't protect themselves. Not all humans. I've studied your species' history. You've produced heroes and villains like any other race. True. But when things get really bad, when everything seems lost, humans have a habit of finding solutions others missed. Marcus turned to face her. What aren't you telling me? This healing process, the quantum consciousness development, there's a bigger purpose behind it. Queen Zarathi activated a holographic display that filled the observation deck with images of deep space. Long-range sensors have detected movement in the galactic void. Ships using technology we haven't seen for millions of years. The Devourers, Marcus said, the name appearing in his mind as if he had always known it. Yes, the same force that destroyed the previous galactic civilization. They consume entire star systems, converting matter and energy into forms we don't understand. The ancient races built weapon caches to fight them, but no single species could operate the technology. Marcus felt understanding dawn. The weapon caches you were protecting, they require multiple species working together. Specifically, they require quantum-linked consciousness between different evolutionary paths. The weapons can only be activated by beings who can bridge the mental gap between species. And you think I can do that? Queen Zarathi nodded. Your neural patterns now show compatibility with both human and Zephyrian consciousness types. You may be able to interface with other species as well. The healing process didn't just save your life. It made you into something the galaxy has needed for millions of years. Marcus absorbed this information. The weight of responsibility felt heavier than anything he had carried as a soldier. How long do we have? 2 years, perhaps less, before the Devourer scouts reach inhabited systems. We need to prepare the Alliance for a war unlike anything they've faced. The Alliance doesn't even know I survived. Admiral Torres thinks I died in the reactor explosion. That can be corrected. But first, we need to test your new capabilities. Queen Zarathi led him to a different section of the ship, where ancient Forerunner artifacts were stored in quantum containment fields. The objects hummed with barely contained energy that made Marcus's enhanced senses tingle. These are communication devices used by the previous civilization, she explained. They've been dormant for millions of years. Our greatest scientists have never been able to activate them. Marcus approached the nearest artifact. It was shaped like a crystalline flower, with petals that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once. As he got closer, the crystal began to glow with soft light. Interesting, Queen Zarathi murmured. Marcus reached out tentatively and touched the artifact. Energy flowed through his consciousness like water finding its proper channel. The crystal blazed with brilliant light, and, suddenly, the observation deck filled with ghostly images. Holographic figures appeared around them, tall, graceful beings with features that suggested both plant and animal characteristics. They spoke in harmonious tones that bypassed Marcus's ears and communicated directly with his mind. The bridge builders have returned, the leader said. We are the last archive of our civilization. You have evolved the consciousness patterns necessary to receive our final message. Marcus felt Queen Zarathi's amazement through their quantum link. These were the Forerunners themselves, speaking across millions of years through technology that preserved their consciousness. The Devourers cannot be destroyed, the Forerunner continued. They are not truly alive as you understand life. They are entropy given purpose, the universe's way of returning complexity to simplicity. But they can be turned aside, sent to consume empty space instead of living worlds. How? Marcus asked. The weapon caches contain reality anchors, devices that can redirect the flow of space-time itself. But they require precise coordination between multiple consciousness types. The mathematical harmony of Zephyrian thought, combined with the chaotic creativity of human minds, can create the resonance patterns necessary. Images flowed through Marcus's awareness, vast machines hidden throughout the galaxy, waiting for beings with the right mental capabilities to awaken them. The Forerunners had built them as a last desperate measure, hoping that future civilizations would evolve the necessary consciousness bridges. Why didn't you use them yourselves? Queen Zarathi asked. We were too unified in our thinking. Our species had evolved beyond the chaos necessary for creative solutions. We could calculate the mathematics, but couldn't generate the random variables needed to complete the equations. Marcus understood. You needed species that thought differently working together. Ordered minds to handle the complex calculations, chaotic minds to provide unexpected solutions. Precisely. The Devourers adapt to any single approach, but they cannot predict the interaction between radically different thinking patterns. The Forerunner images began to fade as the ancient device exhausted its stored energy. Find the other weapon caches. Unite the species of this galaxy. Show them that differences in thought are strengths, not weaknesses. Only together can you survive what is coming. The crystals went dark, leaving Marcus and Queen Zarathi alone with the weight of galactic destiny. This changes everything, Queen Zarathi said. The Alliance needs to know about the Devourer threat immediately. They'll want proof. And they'll want to know why I'm still alive and apparently glowing with alien energy. Queen Zarathi smiled. Let me handle the political complications. Your job is to learn to use these new abilities. If the Forerunners are right, you'll need to interface with technology beyond anything our current civilizations understand. Marcus nodded, feeling the quantum patterns in his mind pulse with new purpose. What about the weapon cache locations? Do you still remember them? Every coordinate is burned into my memory. But activating them will require trust between species that have been suspicious allies at best. Humans and Zephyrians working together is just the beginning. We'll need the crystalline Vartok, the energy beings of the Spiral Nebula, the hive minds of the Outer Rim colonies. Species that barely tolerate each other under the best circumstances. Yes, and we have less than 2 years to convince them to merge their consciousness patterns with beings they consider alien. Marcus felt the challenge ahead like a physical weight. But beneath the fear was something else, the same stubborn determination that had driven him to attempt the impossible rescue of Queen Zarathi. Then, we better get started. As their ship turned toward Alliance space, carrying news that would reshape galactic civilization, deep in the cosmic void, ancient sensors detected the activation of Forerunner technology. Vast ships that had drifted between galaxies for eons began altering course, drawn by the energy signatures of awakening weapons. The Devourers had found their next target. The race between salvation and extinction had begun. In the observation deck, Marcus watched the stars whirl past and felt the quantum resonance patterns flowing through his enhanced consciousness. He was no longer fully human, but he was still fundamentally Marcus Chin, a soldier who refused to accept defeat, even when facing impossible odds. The galaxy would need that stubbornness in the days to come, because humanity's greatest strength had never been their technology or their numbers. It was their complete inability to recognize when they were supposed to give up. And now, enhanced with alien quantum consciousness and backed by ancient Forerunner technology, the human stubbornness might just be enough to save every living thing in the galaxy. The stars seemed to pulse with anticipation as their ship jumped to hyperspace, carrying the seeds of the greatest alliance in galactic history toward an uncertain but determined future.